Tuesday.
I always get, it's coronavirus time, man. I'm getting discombobulated on my day still, but I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. But thank you for this Tuesday edition of the MSP Initiative. Happy to welcome. I've known Tom Watson here from Chief Channel Advisor from Ninja RMM. We've known each other for a long time, going back
over 10 years.
Yeah, I was going to say a decade. So I'm really happy that you had some time to jump on today. I think we're going to have a real cool conversation about, the pitfalls and the benefits and the magic to get past that $1 million threshold for MSPs. But before we get started, Tom, where are you based out of today? How are things been by you? I know like different people are in different places. I always like to just get a lay of the land. So
yeah, I'm in the Washington, D.C. area right now. Spend time in D.C., Northern Virginia, and kind of mostly out on a family property, a farm here, kind of hiding out from this thing.
Right on. So, have things open back up? Are you allowed to go to a restaurant, or are you pretty much still on, cave mode?
Well, I'll be honest. Yeah, you can go out. I mean, I like to go to the gym, George. That's my big thing. So I go to the gym a lot. That's open. It's a little bit of a free for all in there, but things are opening up and enjoying the nice hot summer days now. Doing a lot of gardening and doing a lot of grilling. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, here outside of Philly Metro, the state decided to come up with a color coding system, like red, yellow, green, super novel. But we're in green now, right? So like, restaurants, bars, that kind of stuff, 50% capacity. Still need to wear a mask as you're going to your table, but then once you're at your table with your party, you can take your mask off, kind of thing. Obviously,
I saw a post of you grilling the other day, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I wasn't necessarily grilling food, but I had to grill.
Grilling. You were grilling out though, I think. Said you're doing something outside.
I was grilling paraphernalia, NFL paraphernalia of a team with a star. But
there you go.
There you go. So how are you feel like you're now in a role where you're talking to MSPs all day long? Give me the ebb and flow, right? How are things going now today? Based on all your conversations.
Yeah, George, just set the stage a little bit. As you know, we first met, I was an MSP owner. Yep. And was for 15 years. I sold that MSP from the DC area. And then I was at Axient for a couple of years as their VP of MSP best practices. Now Ninja's brought me on starting this year in January. And I am their channel chief advisor, which is a great role because this is kind of all the stuff I do. I basically work with MSPs on how they can improve themselves. And kind of what I'm seeing is we've done some really interesting webinars on our MSP live chat series at Ninja. And now I think you've seen some of those, and you actually jumped on one a few weeks ago. And I'm kind of on here because you had some good ideas about where people are. And of course, I think we've seen with these COVID times, there's maybe some MSPs out there that may be giving a few too many things away during this time. Or maybe they're wondering, what's the next step? How do I come out of this? And maybe they're going to go back after that big goal, which I think for a lot of those tuning in is going to be, how do you break through that $1 million barrier per year? Or maybe it's 1 million MRR for you, whatever it is. I remember when I was at that point, and I remember the steps it took me. And I know you still have an MSP and you remember what it took there. And we're going to talk a little about that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's, what's funny is that it's cyclical, right? I mean, yeah, the industry's matured a bit, but some of the same challenges that we saw back in 2010 are really the same problems that seem to be here in 2020.
Absolutely.
Degree. Yeah, they've morphed and permutated a bit, but generally speaking, the big things are still there. So let's go back to it, Tom. When did you sell your MSP again?
It was 2015.
Okay, so you're 5 years removed. And
I am.
When you went to go sell your MSP, what were the major metrics that were on the table in order to help determine value?
Well, first thing I think to point out is there wasn't private equity involvement then. We didn't see them scooping these up. There was some of this stuff we saw going on where people from like the copier business were kind of branching out into the MSP world. And it was kind of one of those. I worked with kind of a broker. And basically, the entire value of the MSP came down to that MRR at a multiple.
Okay.
That was it. I mean, I had that usual project work and hardware and software sales. What was your
split? Do you remember MRR versus project break fix hardware?
Yeah, it was 3/4 MRR. I had made the move all the way back. We had the Great Recession, and that hit me pretty hard because I think we're going to talk more about this. I was not making sure I got paid up front by clients. I was doing work, and then it would take a few weeks to get it into an invoice, and then you send it out, and then someone would sit on it for a while, and you'd end up do the work. You wouldn't get paid often for 6-8 weeks after you did the work.
Yeah.
That hit me really hard, and that's why I made the switch totally in 2009 to full managed services. And that was all centered around that payment and that cash flow, how important that was.
So what was your biggest struggle then? Like, so obviously everybody kind of goes through the same pieces, right? You have like a couple hundred accounts that you do stuff on and off for. Then you decide, rip the Band-Aid off. It's all in managed services. You end up losing a bunch of people, right, who don't want to convert. Like today, back then, I think you were doing the bronze, gold, silver type approach, right?
Yeah.
And then like we still see that approach today. Would you consider that same pricing schedule now that you did back in the day, or what were the pitfalls there?
George, it's a great question. I do some MSP consulting to the MSPs that want to talk about primarily how to put these structures together. And I got an email from one of the MSPs I'm working on the other day because they said, "Hey, I went back to one of these webinars you did, and you talked about all these different contracts you had." Because I had titanium, gold, silver, bronze. And then I also consider prepaid hours to be a managed services contract because that was and that's why I think that addition of that last one was my protection. When I went to full managed service, I lost about 10% of my clients, gone. And one of them, a lot of those 10% I wanted to go. But what I did was I identified one, I would say, are these eligible, like large enough clients, over 20 users that I can give an unlimited contract to? And you had to be over 20 users to get unlimited for me. And then I would say, okay, if they're not at that point or I don't trust them on unlimited, I'll have this gold. But then unfortunately, I had that silver and bronze, which I look back at that now. And my email to this client said, if I had to do it over again, I would just do unlimited. I would do gold, which just would be the same thing as the unlimited contract with a set number of hours. And then for anyone out there who maybe I didn't do their full IT or just a piece of it, I would just sell prepaid hours in 10 or 20 hour blocks, period. And I would have just those 3 offerings and simplify, because I look back and it was complicated because I had too many things I was managing on the back end. I was selling too many things.
Right. So, and then usually when you have so many offerings like that, people tend to go towards the lower offering plans, and then they get into the teething problem, right? Yeah. We all run into that one. So today's topic is how to really break through that barrier for all those guys out there that, haven't muscled past the $1 million mark. And that generally in the industry is viewed as the part where you get to a certain number of people, you get to a certain muscle and feel, kind of routine that you've been in for a long time. And then you hit that plateau, and then it seems really hard for some reason to get past that. And then like the next barrier everybody always hears is 5 million, right? So for the guys that are trying to get past that 1 million, or maybe just there and maybe trying to figure out how to get to 5, generally speaking, let's start with the building blocks that prevent people from getting past there. And one of the things we talked about before this webinar was cash flow, right? You mentioned earlier just now that you had a hard, if you weren't invoicing ahead of time and collecting ahead of time, then you created this really large accounts receivable, right?
Yes.
So what's your opinion on all these subscription models out there with all the software, hardware as a service, just generally the pitfalls that people run into from a finances standpoint?
Well, I think the big thing is, and we were talking about before this call, is if I'm going to invest anything in my MSP today to try to break that $1 million hurdle, the 2 big things I'm going to put in money into is that back end system and people to make sure I get paid on time, to make sure I know that cash flow's coming. And the second thing I'm going to put in place are the salespeople to drive that pipeline and to keep it full with new coming in. So I get over that, because you've got to get over that churn. We all know out there, especially with COVID going on, we know that people are going to lose some clients out there, or we're going to have clients that got smaller, they atrophied. And so those 2 big things for me created like that piece that gave me the ability to get over that $1 million hurdle.
So zooming into those 2 pieces, one, back office, like reconciliation, right? I mean, there's like 10, 20, 30, 40 vendors even, where you have layered all these services on in terms of SaaS subscriptions, right? Whether it's security, whether it's backup, whether it's, hardware as a service, whatever it is. And I think part of the first problem is making sure that you don't get lopsided on what your vendors are charging you versus what you're collecting, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my big thing is, and I know you've run into this too, you haven't audited like your Office 365 for a while, or your backup, whoever you're paying backup to, and you go through and it's been 3 months since you audited, you've been paying for those mailboxes or that backup space that you didn't need. And my big thing was putting someone in charge and making it their job that they did two things. They audited our use of licensing and made sure that that was correct on the back end, so that what we're billing is what we're paying for. And then the second thing is making sure your invoices go out to your clients on time for the right amounts. I talk to MSPs all the time, and they make it pretty easy with these tools like ConnectWise and Autotask and stuff like that. But the fact is, a lot of times you got to go in there and tweak that invoice a little bit. You got to add something to it. You've got something they added on, or something like there was an additional invoice that month to the managed services. But getting that monthly MRR based invoicing out every month, same time, requiring a payment by, like, say, I required payment by the first of the month for that next month. And I just started like denying service if people didn't do it. But those big things of cash flow, and then having someone in my company, not myself, but someone who's like a book type keeper type person, and controlling, like I said, that auditing of license use and controlling those invoices going out and all the added, and that was their job, the primary job.
Right. So that person has a couple of different hats, right? There's a lot of software out there that helps keep, track of license use. But I think one of the other things that this person you're talking about does is like actually keep on top of people to make sure that their bills are up to date, right? And whether they're doing ACH or credit card check, whatever it ends up being. I know there's a lot of cool platforms out there like Connect Booster. We had Brady on a couple sessions ago with the automated payments and ACH that you don't have to worry about going after your customers, but that's not foolproof, right? You need to keep on top of your customers. So let me ask you a question. How did you deal with hardware then? I mean, I feel like people always get sucked into the hardware as a service, kind of machine where they end up fronting money somehow. And we talked about how MSP shouldn't be banks.
Yes, exactly. They shouldn't be like one of those check cashing companies, that's doing stuff like that. And then, it becomes a rough thing. So the first thing I would say, my deal on selling hardware was this. I would quote the hardware out. There's no way I'm putting my credit card in with Dell or HP or anyone like that, or Ingram or CW, until I am paid in full for that hardware, period. No concessions on that. Because you drop a physical piece of hardware off at a client and then ask for payment, you already gave them what they wanted. You're losing it. So that's the first thing advice I would give people. The second thing is, I loved Haas. I did a lot of Haas. I liked it. What I did was I used Haas as a way to close deals, to close contracts. And that's kind of what you said, give it away. I gave a lot of hardware away, but I tied it back into the contract. So I didn't really give it to them. I gave it to them with a lot of purse strings. And what I would say like that is, I had small clients, usually under 20 users, where I'd say, oh my God, I don't want to put a contract on with this router and server they have because they're a little old. And these guys don't have the money for it. But I'd stock like I keep like on hand 4 Dell servers that were kind of like under $1,000, and we kind of beefed up a little bit, that we knew inside and out. We knew how they worked. We knew what they were good for. I would roll one of those out, and I would tack it onto the contract in a monthly with the expectation that it would be paid off within a year in terms of my accounting. And I'd give the hardware away to that in that basis. But I would make sure it was contracted and I was going to get paid for, and I was going to cover those costs.
So basically, you made sure that the customer's in a contract long enough to recoup your costs plus, expenses and stuff.
And then I usually, on top of that, I'd say, okay, I'll provide the server. I'm going to do it under this contract. It's going to add, I don't know, 150, 200 bucks a month to the cost. And I'm also going to need a little money up front for you on the install. So okay. I would, and that money up front in the install, I would make sure that value usually covered what the cost was for that physical server. Because my big deal is, I'm dropping, like I said, I look at this thing as, when you give someone a physical item, they don't really feel the indebtedness to you once they have it in their possession. So get paid up front whenever possible. And I saw, by the way, George, I saw we had a chat in here, and yeah, Brent Fairbanks,
right.
we bill a month ahead of time. Yeah, and that was, I would say, I would send my invoices out, and they were required to be paid by the first of the month that service was going to happen. I had to have payment. So it wasn't just sending them out. I required that payment had gone through, and we had accepted it. And then I wouldn't roll anyone out there. And then, I'm sure you've done this too, George. People call up and be like, yeah, but we really need help right now. I know we haven't paid you. I'll be like, yeah, that problem you have, we're gonna have to roll a truck on site, even if you didn't have to. And we're gonna need a check when we get there. We need to wire that money today.
I'm sure that angle is slightly different now with COVID happening, right? Because I'm sure a lot of accounts receivable ballooned a bit.
That's a good point.
I think I just saw a benchmark. A couple, companies do benchmarking, and I saw a benchmarking post, I think yesterday, where they said that 49% of MSPs that respond to the survey said that they lost business since COVID started.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And then they said another 24% said that their business has not grown during that time. So that leaves approximately another 25, 26, 27% who maybe did well, right? And again, these are just the people who responded to this particular survey, a couple thousand companies. But that generally goes against the grain. I've heard some people have done fairly well, right? They've gotten phone calls during this time and been able to onboard customers, remotely and stuff like that. But I assume, back to your point, the MSP not being a bank, we need to collect money up front, right? Especially for things like, how would you handle project work then, Tom?
Oh yeah, I just want to point out one more thing though, is that what about, and maybe that study didn't cover this yet, what about the ones that have just gone to slow pay on their invoices? That's going to hurt. And that's to me where I draw the line. I can't get into a conversation with people about their finances. I have to leave it at, if you're going to do business with us, now you're talking about our finances, and we have to have payment by this date. And I would honestly, I might give a couple slack, but chasing people around for money is not worth it. Now, in terms of project work, the way I always build project was I'd overestimate the hours a bit, because we never really know what's going to happen. And you never want to come back to the client with, it took 10 more hours than we thought. So overestimate them a bit, and then require 50% on that estimate. So if it's a 40-hour labor, I require 50% upfront before the project work is undertaken, and then the other 50% upon completion.
Okay. That
fair. How about you?
Yeah. No, project work, I always try, like I got stuck for a while in the early days on that 50-50, right? Where it's like half up front, half when the job's done. Then I realized that we really needed to go into progress-based invoicing, right? It's like, hey, we get to this point, we're going to invoice you. We expect payment at that time, because I feel like that 50% on the back end always gets stuck for some reason on that.
Yeah, it does.
I definitely learned my lesson there. So a couple questions came in. Brian, again, he said, have you heard of anyone charging a premium for sending a tech, in terms of hazard duty? I had Brad Gross on a while, 2 sessions on MSP Initiative. I know what he would say, but what would you say to that question?
George, first, I want to say one more thing about the 50-50. That's what I did. That's what I did on project work. I got to tell you something. I started an MSP these days. You're paying me everything for everything up front, because and if you don't, that's fine, because I'm just going to only stack my business with clients that are willing to. And then I'm going to spend so much less time on administrative and billing that I'm going to be able to grow my business, because I'm not dealing with that stuff as much. So that's what I do now if I was approaching it. Now, in terms of charging a premium for hazard duty, I don't know, man. I mean, I think you start getting to things. This reminds me of charging people trip charges and coming up with extra charges for rolling a truck. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't do any of that stuff. I like to keep my billing very straight up. This is what you pay per month. This is everything you get. And I would even total in there, if they were in downtown DC, I would figure out what the parking in that area was going to cost us, and I would roll everything what I thought my costs were into that managed service agreement and just do it that way. Because like I said, I don't want to be chasing people around for separate invoices.
No, fair enough. I know Brad Gross would say that, like, listen, you need to work with your employees to figure out if they're comfortable enough to go out or if they have a pre-existing condition that would make them, more hazard versus others. But if you give them the appropriate PPE, if you've coordinated with your customers on the expectations of what happens on site in terms of social distancing, then you shouldn't create a precedence of hazard pay.
I think you turn off a client with that if you started throwing things down. If I were a client, I'd probably sit there and go, after a couple of times of that, I'd be like, let me talk to someone who's not surcharging this for something. They might see the validity of it in some way, but they also might see that it could look like a cash grab at some level.
For sure. Another question here from George. He said, have you had any experience with like a pre-authorized debit? You ever deal with a vendor who's like, I'm going to put this into your card. I'm not going to charge you. I'm just going to make sure that there's a hold there. Almost like when you go to a hotel or something, right? In terms of project work, hardware, anything like that.
No, I mean, no, I don't exactly understand. How do you see that working with the client?
Yeah, I mean, usually, so he just responded again on a monthly pre-authorized from the bank or monthly pre-authorized from the bank. So, I almost feel like that mechanism is a little bit double-edged sword, and here's what I mean. Just because you get something pre-authorized doesn't mean it's 100% guaranteed to be there when you go to actually transact. I've seen that happen many times, and it's a very uncomfortable situation when you go have that conversation. To Tom's point, simplification usually is the better way to go about things. And I understand we're getting creative now during COVID time, but the reality is that time and material, and especially hard costs, hardware and subscription-based services, I don't know if I would want to really play around with extra steps to get to actual payment, right? Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, what comes down to me, I mean, both personally and professionally in business, I run zero debt operations with zero bank notes and financial instruments. That's just, and I may grow slower and stuff like that and deal with these things, but my feeling is whenever you tack financial instruments, especially ones that I don't understand completely all the mechanisms behind them, or the money's not really there, and then it becomes a conversation. I want everything that I pay for to come out directly out of my bank account, and then everything I get paid for directly come from a bank account to mine. I don't want any intermediaries or any instruments that possibly dilute that in some way.
What about leasing? Or I know there's some of these hardware as a service programs now through distribution, Tom. Have you ever thought, considered any of that?
What I like doing is that when, for example, I bought a lot of hardware from Dell. I would turn clients over to Dell's leasing program so that they could then buy it, and the purchase would still come through us, but Dell would do the financing with the client.
Okay, that's in it. Yeah, but and then as part of that transaction, you get paid right away, right? I mean,
yes.
that's the end. So let's pivot. So we talked a lot about financing and finances and cash flow. We all know cash flow is king. I'll say it just for the sake of saying it. When we come to the personnel problem, right? Meaning usually everybody starts out of their garage, out of their trunk, out of their basement, whatever. And then like, as you're trying to build your business, at what point do you have to really understand when people need to be added? And then at what point do you, as maybe the founder, the owner-led technical person in your organization, kind of break away from wearing too many hats?
I think that point happened for me when I would see that there was potential business leads coming in from various ways, referrals or from network events, whatever they were, and I wasn't able to follow up on them myself. I wasn't able, or in a timely manner. I was possibly not landing that business because I was in my own way, and because I was wearing too many hats at that point. And that was, to me, the deciding factor. And I look at like I said, the two main things that allowed me to break through that barrier are, one, bringing dedicated salespeople in, and two, having that person that was a buffer between me and the rest of the organization and clients that allowed me to focus in on just the pieces that I wanted to work on.
So is that a service desk manager, an office manager, a general manager? Like, what's that buffer?
Yeah, I had someone that was a service manager and dispatcher, and they kind of filled both those roles. And then that person acted as a buffer in the rest of the organization and with the clients, because I found what I had to stop once a client was onboarded and we had them, and even if I had the relation to begin with, I needed to hand that relationship off so I could focus on new clients coming in and bringing them into the fold. So I had someone sitting in between me and them and managing those relationships. I also brought the salespeople in, which one of the important things I did was I had the salespeople also do a level of account management after the deal was closed.
So how would that person get compensated then? Like, you bring a salesperson in, what do you pay him? How do they get commission? How does account management get compensated? Just so that people understand how that works.
Yeah, I pay them a base that would not be enough to live comfortably in whatever area you're in. An amount that might cover the mortgage and, a few of the bills, but is probably not going to make for much of a lifestyle. So that it requires the person to really hunt. The second thing is I would pay them 10% of the contract that they brought in. But I'd only pay that 10% for the first year. And then they would get 10% the second year in terms of, and I wouldn't pay that 10% on the first year until that contract had been in place 2 months. So that I tie them pretty close to that contract being successful at the beginning. And then I would add on a small amount, somewhere $50 to $100 for account management of that client ongoing, to make sure they stayed in there. They stopped by. They did their salesmanship for things they might other need or referrals they could have.
Okay, so Brent asked another question here. Did the math that you just laid out, is that on gross profit or or really net profit, because profit's net profit, or the total value of the contract top line, gross?
I would look at this amount as, I'd have to go look on it on my actual calculator, but I believe it was on the gross contract value.
Okay. So if somebody signed a 3-year deal with you and that deal was, let's call it $1,000 a month just for raw numbers. So that's a $36,000, total contract value over the term of the customer. And then you're paying out annually, right? You're not paying out the entire contract in one time.
Yeah. So it'd be $1,200 a year on that contract. So they get the $3,600 over the 3 years. 10% of the 36. And then I would add on an amount depending on how much that was, an amount for they would be paid monthly for account management.
Got it. So
they have some duties.
So if that person was managing a book of 25 customers, $100 a customer, that's $2,500 a month.
Exactly. Often it would be a little less than that. They bring in small ones, maybe it'll be $50 for that, $1,500 a month contract, that kind of thing. But it tied them well. It kept them in the game. It created a buffer between that client and the rest of the company for problems that were often could be mitigated that were just, personality problems or just a communication problem.
Customer service issues. Yeah. I know people just vibe different ways. It just happens. So George asks another interesting one. So he says, what are some of the steps involved in actually building your sales team out? We're currently at $1 million plateau, but we've never done any marketing, but we are interested in building a sales team. What do you look for in a salesperson? What are their day-to-day duties, activities, cold calling, question mark?
Now, the first thing I would look at is, it does sound like he's right at the point where it's probably time to get that salesperson. I would first ask myself, how am I going to, early on, before that salesperson has real connections in the community, and also considering these times, how am I going to feed that salesperson leads?
Mm-hmm.
And I would establish what that mechanism is. I would probably be looking at some level of marketing. I would be more likely to outsource my marketing to one or a couple of firms that are out there that specialize in MSP marketing. And I would probably put some investment into some type of CRM. I would have all these pieces in place. And then I would also set aside some money with the expectation that salesperson is probably not going to produce anything for a while. And we don't know, George. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how does COVID look for bringing salespeople on. I don't know about you, but my salespeople, they got their business through BNI and Chamber of Commerce and all these in-person networking events. And people can say whatever they want about doing this stuff remotely. It's not the same thing. and I don't know how it's going to feed people.
100%. Yeah. So back to your point, sales and business development are always looked at the same, but they're really supposed to be separated, right?
Absolutely.
Business development is lead generation, right? You're funneling in people who are potentially good fits so that your salesperson can then take over and figure out, is there an opportunity here? Present it and close it, right? So a salesperson's supposed to be a closer. Your business development efforts are supposed to be lead gen, right? Getting those people through the front door. And so marketing and lead gen are very closely tied. You need to not just put, money into, websites and graphics and that kind of stuff. You need to be putting money into appointments. You need to be putting money into, what we call inbound marketing, right? You're putting a lot of education out there and you're going to try and bring people back through education, which kind of fits right in line with where COVID is. There's a lot of people who there's a lot of uncertainty out there in terms of coming back to work, remote workers, people spread out between different states, even different countries. And I think that there's a lot of good opportunity right now if you're presenting the right content. So no matter what you do, if you do decide to take up Tom's suggestion and get an outside marketing firm to help you with polishing things, you should have a face to that, right? Meaning you should be educating people on, here's the things that can help you in this area, this area, this area, and sell through education and sell through, hey, I want to help you, rather than the used car sales, kind of gimmick, right? The hard sell probably doesn't work right now, but I'll argue that there's a lot of opportunity that we've heard out there for people who, were not ready for this type of situation to occur. It could have been because they decided not to spend the money. It could have been because the company they're working with, just wasn't positioned properly to have the right systems in place to help these people. But there's a lot of actually people out there who are looking for, how do we make sure that we're not stuck moving into 2021? We don't know how long this thing lasts. And frankly, I think a lot of people have decided, hey, we've put off this remote working cloud thing for a while, and now they've realized that that's kind of the way forward, after they've been beaten on the head over and over and over again, possibly. So I also think, Tom, to your point, or kind of enhancing your point, co-managed IT is becoming very popular right now. And part of the reason why is these larger entities who may have had a couple of resources internally for technology have had to cut back or slim down, or maybe even eliminate that person to try and cut costs. And that's where the MSP is in a great position to either augment or, help replace that personnel or that, that role, if for some reason the person that was there before just didn't work in the math, right? So what is your opinion on that?
First thing, you brought up a couple things. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I would do if I did it again. And I've had a lot of opportunity because, I've been back in the channel for a couple of years now, George, 2.5 years. And all I've done the past 2.5 years is talk to MSPs and do content similar to this and come up with it. And I've also gotten to see what MSPs do from the other side. It's a vendor, but understanding what MSPs do. And the one thing I look at is, if I was going into it now, first of all, like I said, I'd be very simplified in my contracts. And I think that's going to, if you are managing less different kinds of contracts now and selling them, that's going to put you at an advantage now. And being very selective, not going after everything, being very selective. So I would probably only do networks that were probably above 30 users. This is what I would do now. I would then, on top of that, I would have dedicated salespeople who were hunting for co-managed deals. I would be looking for those left and right, because I'll tell you what, as companies sit there and let more of their workforce work from home, that is prime for them to get rid of the in-house IT guy that they probably already had headaches managing, and to let a company handle that with their team of people and a knock and all of that. I would be hunting for those deals all over the place, because I think that co-managed IT is the future of IT for many companies, because it reduces their costs and it often gives them much better coverage for their network.
100%. So let's ask this question. At what point does the owner-led technical team, at what point do they step back from the day-to-day, troubleshooting, help desk? Is that not the first hat that they should take off at some point?
Yeah, my feeling is that I probably took about 2 extra years of touching people's hardware, playing with it, going out there to save the day like Superman. When that is yeah, it's great, and it's good sometimes to show up with the troops and be there. But the point where I decide, yeah, I might show up and pat them on the back and say, good job, guys, and give my input. But I wasn't enabling my employees. And I also was taking myself out of growing my business. And it's almost like you might take a financial hit for on it a while too, because you're probably your best technician. A lot of the people listening, but you're going to have to make that decision. I am not going to do technical work anymore. I'm going to grow my business, and I'm going to leave it to other people to figure it out, because I'm going to enable them with the right tools. And then I'm going to go out there and hunt more business, because probably, especially in these COVID times, you might be tight on hiring a salesperson. You might be tight on a lot of things, but if you free yourself up to do it, you're probably your best salesperson in your company too. So I think that's the jump point. And George, did you get to that point where you were still too deep in the weeds, and then you had to finally go, what am I doing, and pull away?
Yeah, I mean, this is a long running stigma. I'm sure everybody's got to, commiserate here. The, 80, 90 hour weeks, 14, 15 hour days, weekends, holidays. I mean, it takes a toll, guys, right? I mean, the less sleep, the more Monster and Red Bull you drink, the worse off it gets. And I mean, at some point there needs to be the work-life balance, or else you'll get burnt out. And then at some point just give up on it, I think. Or you'll just be one of those kind of, curmudgeons, kind of, I battled through it, I was in the trench, but then you look at your business and you've never really gotten past a certain point. So I think that to some degree, there is a point where you have to let go, and you do need to rely on other people. And I'm not saying just put somebody into the deep end and not give them help. They definitely need to understand the expectations and the responsibilities. But at some point, yes, you as the owner need to understand how your business runs, how you generate more business, because just staying flat isn't the answer, right? I know you've probably heard 1,000 people say, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think COVID probably, hammered through that to a large degree, because now all these people that were probably long-standing relationships, customers doing well, now even have either downsized and shut their doors in some cases. And now all of a sudden you've not gone out there prospecting for new business in a long time, and you're in a bad spot.
Yeah, we got a question here. How did you get to that mindset? What happened was, I remember distinctly a couple times I was in data centers with my guys, 2 a.m, behind a server, every cable ripped out, devices all over the floor. And then I'm sitting there going, yeah, I didn't follow up with that client, that potential prospect. I didn't follow up with that one. And how the hell am I going to do this tomorrow after I've been here all night? And after I did that enough times, I said, I have to change my mindset, because I am the roadblock in my business growing, because I am sitting here doing work that I can pay someone else to do. Whereas I probably can't pay someone to do exactly what I'm doing on the sales side with some of these particular prospects. So deciding, what can I pay people to do and what can I not pay people to do? I can't pay someone else to lead my company. I can't, for probably the best deals my company ever landed contract wise, I probably can't pay a salesperson to find and close those. So that's the defining moment right there.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the prospecting and sales cycle, speed is a huge reality, right? The longer it takes you to get back to that person, the worse position that you're in, right? So like to your point, Tom, I mean, if you're getting hung up in the weeds and then you'll have time to actually deal with the front line stuff, then there's a problem. Let me ask you, let me pivot for a second. Let me go somewhere else. How did you handle, either, did you do it in the contract renewal, or did you build it into the agreement, but increasing the cost over time of your services?
Yeah, no, I recommend on that. Listen, especially given the times, we're going to have inflation. There's no doubt. You can't pump dollars into the system and not then have the value of the dollar go down. So I always put in my contracts that here's the price you get for the first year. And then I would carry that over the second year, but on the third year of that contract, it went up a certain amount.
Mm-hmm.
I would just build it right into the contract. I made my contracts auto renewing, but I would recommend that you make an escalation per year of 5 to 10% at this point. It just happens the first year, and make sure when you're selling and you're pitching that contract, you go over that part and you get them to initial right where it says that, because I will tell you that will be the one thing they claim they never saw in that contract, but you put it right in there.
They signed it, Tom.
Yeah. That escalation, they'll be like, I didn't sign this would automatically go up. Yeah, you want to, though. You want to protect yourself with that.
So when that contract goes up, let's say it's 5 or 10% a year, are you adding additional services into that new revenue that's automatically increasing, or is that over and above that amount?
I would generally, I try my best not to change services during a contract. If it was going to be substantial, and let's say I decided this client now needs to be doing security awareness training, and I'm going to put them on that service that involves that, I would probably do an addendum to that contract and send it over to them and have them sign off on it, that we're adding it, increasing their monthly by this amount, and how that all cascades down into the rest of the contract and the renewals and everything like that. Send it over by email, give them kind of maybe even a spreadsheet that shows how it works, something like that. But I would, whenever possible, I would try not to change a contract and have it rely on, one, the escalation each year in there, and two, the auto renewal. Because I'd be honest with you, I always looked at my contracts as I wanted to make these contracts. When I rebuilt kind of the company in 2009 and built it around managed services, I was building the company to sell. And as a part of that, I knew it would be attractive to a buyer to have auto renewing contracts that were already increasing in what the client paid. That's very attractive because they're not going to have to go renegotiate those. They're buying something that's going to increase in value as they own them.
No, it's a good point. I definitely think that there's some truth to, especially now, right? Security seems to be exploding. And technology obviously is changing at a rapid pace over time, right? There's the need to, add additional things, right? I mean, now, right? Ransomware is big, layering more security services on, stuff like that, is an example, right? Or, let me ask you, another question, right? I mean, back in 2015, 2014, 2013, I'm sure, I know I didn't, but I'm sure you didn't put in there that you were going to send trucks to people's houses. Today, that's a slightly different story now, isn't it? What do you think about that situation?
Well, I kind of allocated for sending them. Well, I did two things. One thing is I handled a lot of law firms. That was 30 to 40% of my business. Okay. I required at law firms and other similar type companies. I also had a lot of lobbying firms. Hey, it's DC, right? And I would require that the senior partners, I know how they work. I know they work from home all the time. I would require that they had equipment, computers, routers, firewalls, all of that stuff, switches, all that we provided at their home with tunnels set up and the whole kind of thing. So we already managed, we required it, and we set all that stuff up. So that, I think, and I've talked about that on a previous podcast, that would set me up for pretty good success in these COVID times. If I already had the major principals at companies, we were already running their home networks. But I would, if I was looking at it now for having to roll trucks to people's houses, and of course, people are commuting. Now you're driving to the distance. I would probably have to come back with some type of monthly adjustment on those contracts. I don't know what I would do. I would, I don't believe. I'd like to believe in many cases you don't have to send a truck out to someone's house. That you can have you can configure some equipment and drop it UPS or something like that and send it out there and they can plug it in. But we all know that people have crazy stuff set up. Who knows what they have plugged in? And we don't know, is the problem lie at the ISP or with the device out there? We didn't sell them the device. I would probably do things like start requiring, if someone's going to work from home and they've had problems with the setup there, I'd probably require they buy new hardware from us, including a new business grade router. It might be just like a Soho router, requiring they had a laptop we provided and not just their home laptop. And any work they're going to do for the client, they have to do on the equipment supplied by us. I'd probably start giving much more strict rules. And I think those strict rules would result in fewer of rolling trucks.
Okay, fair enough. So what about the situation where, you know, you're in this gray area, right? The customer is now, you know, having people log in from the home stuff. You haven't provided them the workstation. Are you installing your RMM, your Ninja RMM agent on that home computer? Like, what is your game plan there? Like, is there wiggle room in your thought, or is it, no, this is the strategy and we're not backing away from it?
Yeah, I had a really hard time years ago with people's home hardware. I mean, it's problematic. You know, you're not going to buy that Acer laptop from Costco and tell me it's the same as the precision workstation laptop I bought from Dell. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the thing, is I would probably have pretty strict rules written as to what was an acceptable piece of hardware and what wasn't. And I'd be very quick to pull the trigger on, nope, sorry, that's not going to work. Here's an invoice for a new machine. I just, and if I was doing it again, you know, George, I think a lot of this is bitterness at myself for everything I gave away. Yeah. and how I was too lenient. No, it's important to remember, you have something they need. You're providing services that allow their businesses to operate. You're in the driver's seat. You have the power because your income is probably distributed amongst quite a few different clients. You have the power, and don't be afraid to push it around a little bit and make sure that you're getting paid and it's not extra effort for you. I am not going to let, if I'm running an MSP, I'm not going to let clients create extra administrative hassle for me or technical hassle that only alleviates a problem for them and probably doesn't ultimately, because it probably just continues on the problem. I'm not very understanding of that stuff. I don't know if this is an empathy issue with me, George, or not, but I mean, I honestly believe my approach would make me a lot more money now because I'm not going to. Yeah.
You're probably right.
I'm not going to do things. I'm going to do things always primarily for what profits my business and me personally. And because if I'm not doing that, then why am I even in business?
Fair enough. So at what point do you tell an MSP who's trying to go further, right? So we had somebody say, hey, I really never done marketing and haven't had dedicated sales. Now we're talking about it or looking into it. Or, hey, at what point do you tell them, hey, there's a gap in a finance standpoint to bring this additional person or persons on and to go out there and borrow money?
Yeah, my big thing is, are you guys operating month to month in terms of cash, or do you have money in the bank? Because if I'm going to take that business to 1 million or beyond, or if I'm looking, especially if I want to really increase that MRR, if I'm going to increase my MRR, I need to have some type of dedicated marketing function, either in-house or most probably outsourced. And because, like I said, I'm then going to need to use that to fuel that sales guy as he's getting up and running. And sometimes it doesn't work out with him, but I'm probably going to need to pay a sales guy 8 months to a year at a loss. So I'm going to look at, do I have the cash reserves? Do I have the cash reserves to support that kind of operation getting up and running?
Okay. And if you don't have the cash reserves, what do you do then?
I would probably try to do it myself internally in terms of, like I said, walling off pieces of the organization from me, deciding what I'm going to work on. Okay, I'm going to be the primary salesperson. And to do that, I'm going to need a good CRM, probably something beyond what the PSA has. I'm going to need something to get me leads. I'm going to contact one of the MSP marketing firms out there. And I'm going to tell them, hey, listen, I need to produce some sort of funnel into me. And then I'm going to make sure that the company understands that, no, I'm not available 24/7 for the technical problems, all that kind of stuff. I can step in a pinch in order to answer questions, but I don't do the technical work anymore, and I'm focused on this. So I would probably first, if I didn't have the cash, I would set up the situation so that I could become that primary salesperson, with the idea that produces those cash reserves and that churn that I can then bring in a salesperson, maybe hand off those leads I've already been working on to them.
Okay. So kind of getting into the final stretch here. What are the, top 1, 2, 3 things, other than the stuff that we've talked about, that would prevent somebody from getting past this plateau?
Oh, George, I'm glad you asked that, because when we talked before this, you asked the question and you said, how do you make sure those contracts you have, how do you evaluate them down the road and make sure they are profitable?
Profitability, yeah.
Yeah. I had, you know what, this is really funny because what I came up with back in 2008, 2009 is I came up with a spreadsheet, and it was an MSP costing spreadsheet. And what I did was I looked at all of my existing clients at that time, and I said, let me decide which ones off the top of my head meet. Well, let me look at, are they paying us enough on an average month that I would want to give them a contract? And then would I want them on a contract, or are they likely to beat me up in some way? And then I put them over in the pile of prepaid hours. And then once I got in the contract thing, I would get their invoices. I would separate out the invoices that had to do with project work and when I onboarded them. And I would look at like maybe a 2-year set of invoices that were just regular monthly service and things like they were paying me for like backup, antivirus, all the add-ons. And I would punch them into this spreadsheet, and I would figure out what my cost per technician hour was, and it had a place for that. And then how many hours on average they're using per month, and then how much antivirus, how much backup, how much Office 365, all those pieces. And it would come out with a number. And my number would be my hard cost to run that network every month, to run that client. And then I would have it apply a formula to it. And in that formula, it would then calculate what I needed to charge in order to where I made enough percentage profit that it made sense to me. And then it had another formula that pulled out the commission if I had a salesperson. And then what my net would be on that contract. Now here's where it gets interesting. I used this to evaluate existing clients to see if I wanted to move them to managed services to come up with a price. That then allowed me to figure out if it was a net new prospect, if I would line them up to a similar contract I already had that was working out and this spreadsheet, and use that as a basis on what to charge, what to quote out for a net new prospect. Now here's where the spreadsheet had the most value though. I would open up that spreadsheet once every 60 days for the first year of a contract with a client. I would copy that original spreadsheet sheet to a second sheet. And then I would duplicate it on that second sheet. And then I would call that second one actual. And I would look at, for at that point, every 60 days, what were they actually consuming? And then I could look at what I quoted and what all the usage was and where that money was going. And what I was looking for is that profitability in that spreadsheet going up over time, because if it's not, I did something wrong. Because any managed service agreement you sign up should become profitable the longer it's baked in, because you become more efficient on it. You've gotten past the hurdles. You've got more of your own hardware in there. You've figured out all the kinks. You've done that blitzkrieg approach on it right from the beginning and knocked down all those problems. And now you're in really good shape.
Interesting. I wonder how many people are actually doing customer by customer profitability monitoring. I would argue that that's definitely an Achilles heel to actually getting to a certain point, because if you're actually, say 80-20 rule, we've heard it 1,000 times, you're actually losing money by having a contract, something's wrong.
Absolutely. And yeah, I do have that spreadsheet. I actually use it, and people can reach out to me, TW@MSP Go, if they want to talk about that kind of thing. And, it's a pretty interesting way to go through it. It's very manual, and it's just a spreadsheet, but it gives you that visual element of seeing every single line item of hours and Office 365 and backup to where that money is coming in and going out. And it's really interesting, George, because as you said, a lot of the things we did 10 years ago very much hold true now. And a lot of it is just figuring out, is that contract profitable to us, and is it becoming more profitable with time?
Yeah, I would argue that a lot of people aren't doing this, and it's a really big Achilles heel, especially if you ever go to borrow money, right? Because these are the types of finances that really help you get in the right position. Or to Tom's, situation, if you ultimately do sell your company, this is the type of stuff that really hits home, right, in the valuation of what your book of business. And it's very interesting. So at what point, Tom, did you decide on that math to fire a customer?
I only had a couple, but I had a couple where they were often lower value per month contracts. I always found if I was getting $2,500 a month or more on a contract, I could make that thing profitable. Where it got sticky was on these ones that were $1,000 to $24.99. There's just too much room on those where something just goes awry one month and you're buried in that in service hours.
Mm-hmm.
You're digging out there. So that's kind of goes back to my thing is if I'm building an MSP today, I'm just not taking on small contracts. I'm not going to try to do that. I'm going to go after larger ones and grow slower, but have more profitability in them, but also have that ability to make them more profitable over time. But if I found a contract where I was consistently in a year losing money on that contract out of like 4 to 6 months, yeah, they got to go. I got to get rid of that thing. I mean, and usually I had some other MSPs I was friends with that I would talk to them about those contracts and basically get them to assume the contract on the basis that they would be able to then up the price at the end of it or close it out relatively quickly, because sometimes there's just other people that can run a contract better than you. And I had graduated to a point where my company wasn't very proficient. We were doing a lot of co-managed IT, but we weren't very proficient at handling the smaller clients.
Fair enough. That's good. Knowing where you fit best, that's important. So you said contract profitability, understanding when to fire a customer. Any other thoughts on reasons why you would be prevented from getting past the plateau?
I think a lot of it comes down to how much money you have in the bank. And while I am not someone that likes to take on bank debt or loans and stuff like that, if I was at that point where that's going to be the final deciding factor, it'd probably be more likely I'd take on some type of private investment through friends or family or something like that. But I would stack the deck in my favor by having enough money to be able to make these decisions for hirings and having the right people. And even if I had to do so, maybe I probably would reevaluate my stance on it if I was in the mix right now. Because if that was the deciding factor of being able to finance having a new salesperson on inside or a director of operations service manager until they got up and running, they're really effective, I probably would make that jump and do it. So finding a way to have the cash in reserve to make sure you're not in trouble, take that stress of the cash, because when you're not thinking about money and you're just thinking about growth, that's going to give you a lot of leeway to grow your business. You're not going to be spending time on those accounts and if the credit card paid off or where do I got to move money this month? Every time you're spending doing things like detracting from you running and growing your business.
100%. Hey, Tom, we could probably go on for another hour easily.
Yeah. Easily. Yeah.
About it. It's really good to hear that. Listen, we're both talking to MSPs out in the world. Some stuff changes, but a lot of stuff stays the same. And it's really nice to see when people get past that bottom echelon, right? And they get past this $1, $2, $3, $4 million range, right? That's when they're really on fire. And I think that as much as we hear about MSPs selling and consolidating and VC and all this stuff, I'll tell you what, I'm more excited about this industry now than I have been in a few years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I am too, George. I often think I had someone the other day, an old business partner owned a web development company, and we were just having lunch, and he sat down and he said, that MSP you had, you're really good at that. You should do that again. And I was like, oh man, you're killing me here. I don't know if I can do that, but I know we're closing out here. I just wanted to also say, thank you to Ninja RMM and for having me on their role as the channel chief advisor. And we have a webinar next week in our MSP live chat series. We're doing it with Kevin Klein of MSP Growth Hacks. It's going to be how to figure out these times and kind of what you can do sales wise, campaigns to really get that going. And wanted to mention, people are more than welcome to reach out to me with any questions you have. Find me on LinkedIn, Tom Watson, Ninja RMM. You'll see it up there, or tw@mspgo.com.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you having on. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll watch this. And remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1:00 Eastern time, MSP Initiative. It's Tuesday. I remember now. Tom, enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see everybody on Thursday at 1:00.
Thanks, George.